Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I read only nonfiction this last week and it was kind of fun. I had a good time, so I'm really excited to talk about some of these books. There were some really good ones, but of course, the embroidery update. After finishing my Jesus picture, my older daughter said, "Mom, I need something Star Wars themed. Could you please stitch me something Star Wars themed?" So I decided, yes, I can do this. So I went and bought black fabric because I thought, well, I mean, it's Star Wars, you gotta have it out in space. And so I got started, and it's more difficult to stitch on black fabric because any markings you make are difficult to see, right? So I had some white interfacing on the back that I drew most of everything in reverse image, but keeping it right on the front. Anyways, it has presented so many more challenges than I was prepared for. Also, some of the elements that I'm adding in have such small details, and I have not been making things with really tiny details for a while, and so they didn't come out as clear as I would like. So it has been a bit of a mess, but you know what? They're not design flaws, they're design details. It's the style. We're just sticking with it at this point, so let me show you what I've got. So we have May the Force Be With You, we have BB-8 and R2-D2. They're fine. The tiny details that they've got, not great. Just don't look too close. But from a distance, yeah, it's fine. And then I'm gonna put maybe a lightsaber here, and then she'll have her Star Wars stitchery. Working on a dark fabric has been a challenge, but I am thinking I could add in some little stars in the background. I'm trying to decide if I want to stitch them or just paint tiny little dots, or if that would just make it look like dandruff fell all over it. I don't know, but that's what's going to happen next with this stitchery. So I'm having fun. It's a little bit different, and I'm not quite sure about this one. So let's talk about the books that I read this week, because I have read some excellent nonfiction. So two of the books that I read this week were recommendations from the channel A Cat Bite, and I will make sure to link that down below. She is one of my favorite YouTubers, has some great recommendations and great thoughts, especially I love her nonfiction books, but she also talks a lot about fantasy if you're interested in that. So go check her out. But the first one that she recommended was Moneyland, Why Thieves and Crooks Now Rule the World and How to Take It Back by Oliver Bullough. So this book is following the ultra rich and how they stay that way. So it is talking about what they spend money on, how they're making their money. It's talking about corruption. It's talking about offshore accounts. It's talking about tax evasion. It's talking about straight up just criminal activity and ways that these people use globalization, use these different systems to take money from people, hang on to it, and pass it down to their kids, and don't pay their fair share and do very unethical things. And I think this was really fascinating. I thought it was very eye-opening to kind of see how things go on, see what the super rich people are investing in and what they are doing with their money that is not very on the up and up. I thought this book had some really interesting looks on how some of these people try to control the narrative surrounding them and how they are using and spending their money and how effective it is. And it also had some ideas of what we can do about it as a society. And I thought this was really good. I enjoyed it. I think anyone should read it. And I thought as I read it, wow, this is a 5-star book. This is so good. And then I read my next nonfiction book and thought, how could anything be a 5-star book compared to this next book? This next book is one of the best nonfiction books that I have read this year, and I'm sure that I have said that before already this year, but this stands out as an amazing nonfiction book. And this is Spain in Our Hearts, Americans in the Spanish Civil War, 1936 through 1939 by Adam Hochschild. And I have read 2 other books by this author. I have read King Leopold's Ghost, where he talks about the exploitation of the Congo, and also To End All Wars, where he talked about World War I and the people who refused to fight. And so when I saw that he had a book that was released back in 2016 that talked about the Spanish Civil War, I knew I needed to read this, and I am so glad I did. There is something about living in Spain that does make a lot of that history feel very fresh. Now, Adam Hochschild does take the perspective in this book of the Americans who went to fight in the Spanish Civil War. And so it is very focused through that lens, but something that I appreciated in this and I appreciated in his past books, that even though he has a specific perspective that he is going through, it does not mean that you aren't going to get a very thorough overview of the events, the political climate, and everything that went into it. And I really appreciated having a very thorough look at some of the politics and what was going on during and around the Spanish Civil War. I found it to be much more informative than, say, Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell, which I read a few years ago, which sure may have talked about the Spanish Civil War, but didn't give me the kind of context that you get in this one. This just was fantastic, giving that whole overview. And while the stories of the individual Americans that went to fight were interesting, what really grabbed me was just his storytelling of all the events and really giving a thorough context of the war. For me, I really thought it was interesting because I know a lot of the places that were talked about. I have been to some of those places, and it made me so proud to live here in Catalonia and the culture and the strength that the people have had here. And where this book also was very successful is how timely it is. It might honestly be a bit of a difficult read right now. This book really shows some of the hallmarks of a rise to fascism, and it is scary to see parallels in modern day, and it was so difficult to see some of those steps: women losing rights, violence against women increasing, othering certain groups of people. There were so many things that Franco was doing that mirror current day events, and I think this is a really interesting book to understand some of the history of fascism and how important it is to oppose it. Now, the Spanish Civil War, the fascists won. Franco ruled for a long time, and I have met many people who still remember being beaten in school for speaking Catalan and for being oppressed for many years. And this is a relevant issue because Franco is not long gone. And so it's a very relevant issue here, as well as watching those steps leading up to that and the involvement of the Soviet Union, the involvement of Germany, and seeing how this was a bit of a testing ground for some of these countries leading up into World War II. And so I thought this book was just fantastic, so well researched. I have not met an Adam Hochschild book that hasn't changed my life in some way. I think anyone can find so much relatable in this. And these Americans who felt such strong anti-fascist sentiment that they were willing to go fight and die for a cause that wasn't even in their own country. Now, I had a comment a while ago recommending the book The Art Thief, A True Story of Love, Crime, and a Dangerous Obsession by Michael Finkel. And I have heard a few other really good reviews, so I was so excited to get to this book. And this book is great. It's short, and it is thrilling. This book is following a man who stole from museums and churches, stole more than 300 items over a period of 8 years, and got away with it for quite a while. And the reason he got away with it in large part was because he never sold any of it. This was not for money. He had this addiction to having these beautiful things in his house, and he was living at his mom's house and had a locked room filled with the world's treasures, and he was stealing all across Europe until he was caught. And this book follows his story and the court cases after, and where is he now, and what has happened. It was so interesting to see a man who loves art, but loves it so selfishly and so single-mindedly that he was willing to go to great lengths to get it for himself and not care about the consequences. You have to wonder what kind of addiction that is, and that he was struggling with it. He couldn't let it go. He had to keep taking things. And so trying to understand where this man was coming from was interesting. Seeing how everything played out and how he was caught was great. I thought this was a really fun book. It's in that true crime genre that I really enjoy because, yes, there are victims. We are all victims that we don't get to see these pieces that have gone missing, but it also isn't anything violent or disturbing that I won't be able to sleep at night. And so it is fun to see the chase and the court cases, and I had a great time. Highly recommend if you like books that have unusual psychology or more of an adventure feel but are nonfiction. I think this book was really good, and I think the author really worked hard to try to understand the different perspectives and the different people involved in this case. This next book was also a recommendation from The Cat Bite, so check out her channel below. And this was Elite Capture: How the Powerful Took Over Identity Politics by Olufemi Otaiwo. This book is a book of political theory and says it's going to talk about identity politics and how it has been co-opted by the elites, because originally the term identity politics was used to show solidarity across lines of difference and how that has changed. And I thought it was going to go more into that, but it didn't really. It mostly was talking about this term of elite capture, which it is in the title, which is a process in which a radical concept is stripped of all of its meaning and used by the political, economic elites to serve their own interests. I thought this book had some really interesting ideas. It is very short, but dense, and I don't know if it was just how or when I was reading it, but it felt like something I was not getting. I'm not sure if it was a lot of waffle for not a lot of substance, or if it was a lot of important substance that I just was not comprehending super well. Now, do I read a ton of books on political theory? Probably not. And do I think that maybe this book would work better for someone who studies political science? Yes. I just don't know if I'm the right person for it, because while I did appreciate the general concept that a lot of ideas and concepts that are supposed to help the every person are taken by the wealthy and the elites to try to further their own interests, yes, okay, I agree there, but all the in-between, I'm not quite sure what I got. Now, I did try to slow down, I did try to get more of this, and I just don't know if it was just over my head or if it just was not very accessible, but it just didn't work for me. In the description of the book, it says that he advances the possibility of organizing across our differences in the urgent struggle for a better world, and I was hoping that I would really get some concrete things that I felt like I could do to help with that. I'm all about let's reach across differences. Let's try to find ways that we can work together to build better things for everyone. Like, great, that's what I want. But I just never feel like I got there as a reader. And it could also be because I don't read a lot of philosophy books, and this book definitely had more of a structure of philosophy. But I think there was just something about the way that even the paragraphs were structured that just felt overly convoluted, and I had a hard time pulling out real meaning. So I think this had a really good idea and probably has a good place for people who study this kind of thing. But I think for the casual reader, at least for me, I struggled to pull the meaning out of it that I was hoping to get. And that is what I have read the last week or so. If you have any thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below. I had so much fun having a nonfiction week, and I have a couple other nonfiction books that I'm starting for this next week. So I will see you all soon with another book wrap up.